Hello and welcome back to the studio here at African Utility Week, and I'm joined now by Imraan Mohamed from Itron. Imraan, firstly, thank you for making the time to be here. And we were talking a little bit off air about what Itron's doing here. Clearly, you do the whole gamut, so we're not going to talk about that. But there's some sort of specific issues, and you look after sub-Saharan Africa about smart metering and smart grids as they go into that region. I'm going to let you talk about those issues because you articulate them better than I do.
Adam, thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Yeah.
I think it's very exciting to be at African Utility Week. I think predominantly Africa has its own challenges, and I think historically we focus on prepayment and revenue management. But you'll see at the Utility Week there's a lot of topics around smart grids, green energy, smart metering. And I think a lot of utilities are saying, well, what does all this mean to us? We have our challenges in terms of electrification, we have our challenges in terms of generation capacity, and if you look at Africa, there's only 25% electrification. So there's a lot of people in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, that don't have access to electricity. And now we're talking about these leaps in technology such as smart grids, smart metering. What do we do? And I think that's one of the perspectives I'd like to bring in terms of how do we marry what we used to and the unique challenges of Africa while still allowing us to leapfrog to some of these new initiatives that could bring benefits.
That was kind of one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of preparing for this trip as well, because you're talking about places where that are very rural and suddenly talking about it seems to me like we're talking about putting in smart meters and smart grids into very rural areas. Like going, well, isn't that a bit like a sledgehammer to crack a walnut in terms of what the problem really is?
Absolutely, and I think I alluded to that in my earlier comments. If you look at smart metering globally, what are the drivers? What are the drivers for smart grids? I think there's a lot of regulation in terms of energy efficiency, carbon emissions, and a lot of the primary smart metering projects in North America and in Europe were driven around the customer billing process, and obviously now getting into this renewable energies, how can we leverage on smart grids and smart metering to actually get the overall benefit? I think if you look at Africa, the challenge is a bit different. Only, the capacity firstly is an issue, so just getting capacity in there. So I think there's an element of smart grids where we could do that more smarter. If I can use the analogy of telecommunications industry, landlines, and we look at cell phones. If you look at the way the cell phone coverage has boomed in Africa.
Well, you leaped an infrastructure.
They've leaped an infrastructure, and I think there's potential at the smart grid infrastructure level to reap some of those benefits. On the smart metering side, it's a bit more tricky. I think what we're seeing, we're quite excited, by the way, to be involved in one of the first large-scale smart metering projects in Africa, in Johannesburg, with City Power. And I think you need to segment your customers. You need to be very clear about your business case. What am I trying to achieve with this? I think there's a lot of benefits and issues linked to smart metering. Is it worth it to put smart metering for all your rural customers? I think not. But I think those are some of the questions. So for me, the message is, what do you want to achieve? There's a lot of benefits in smart metering. And I think from Itron's side, some of those benefits are better customer engagement, having accurate data of your bills, giving them information to be able to understand and budget how they're using electricity.
But in this geography, that's still quite local. So places like Johannesburg or whatever, yeah, fine. But there are a whole swathe of other areas where people aren't even on the grid, but still would like electricity. And to me, I'm going right. Just from a personal perspective, I'm like going, well, surely that's a big issue and a big challenge that also needs to be solved. And how do you get electricity to those potential customers, or if we want to get even more holistic, should they even be potential customers?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting dilemma in terms of the business case for smart metering. Do I invest in this smart metering infrastructure that we know there's benefits as you alluded to in terms of more urban setups? I think the challenge is to get electricity out there. You find governments and there's legislation driving the electrification rate so that people have access to electricity. But I think, you know, it's about understanding what are you willing to pay. And we've seen in smart metering business cases in Africa where utilities are saying, let's segment our customers. Not everybody is the same. The rural person uses only so much of electricity. The driver there is to get them access to electricity, to improve their condition and their way of life. But you're not necessarily going to get benefits from the utility point in terms of demand response or you know, putting in this fancy smart metering technology that you won't get the benefit fully for that type of consumer. So I think we've seen a lot of utilities taking the approach to say the rural, there's a different need, and let's meet that need for what it is, and you don't necessarily need to have smart metering. However, if you're investing in a smart meter program, utilities have customers across rural and urban, and it makes sense to then to leverage on the back office investment. One of the big challenges in Africa is non-technical losses, and I think my colleague will maybe speak more about that. But I think that's where smart metering has a value to play irrespective of the segment. How do you assess and know where your losses are happening in your network? How do you quantify that? And it allows you to actually put in place a program to address the losses and the non-technical losses. So I think that's more one of the benefits smart metering brings to the, if I can say, the rural community. But it doesn't mean everybody needs a smart meter. And I think that's where Itron you know, promotes in terms of it's not about the smart metering is not about the meter. It's about the knowledge in the end. How do you put these systems in place to make good decisions about what do you do with all of this data?
And how you can manage the supply more effectively and get to the end customer. So in terms of the region, because I was reading some articles just you know during the course of what I do, where people saying, well, you know, I think Africa consumes 4% of the world's energy, and we want to double that, and all that. So, if I can ask you, in terms of actually being here on the ground, you know, that's okay. Someone said something, and we want to double that energy. But how are you actually going to supply all of that? I mean, how is that physically possible? Because if everybody around the world is just doubling and tripling their energy consumption, and that's what the media is saying is great, how are we going to deliver all of that?
Yep. I think we said earlier on that Africa, we have a big generation issue, but we have the opportunity to look at, for example, more cost-effective renewable energy. I heard this morning in one of the lectures or the topics saying that you know, if you look at how much energy has been saved due to energy efficiency initiatives, you know, it's staggering. So there's an untapped generation source, if you want, by just becoming more efficient. So I think, yes, Africa has a unique challenge that it has a lot to do in terms of infrastructure development to get the level of supply to meet the demand. But in the same breath, I think the way we approach it in a smarter way in terms of looking at a mix of renewable energy as well as energy efficient technologies, you know, that helps solve the problem in terms of actual capacity needed. So I think there's a lot being said in this conference about those type of topics, and we're fortunate to be part of that community. I mean, our job is really to allow the utilities or the agencies to actually measure accurately, manage the information correctly, so that we can start utilizing electricity and water in a more efficient way, giving utilities information to empower them to operate more efficiently, but also enabling end consumer engagement. I think this is a key topic in Africa. Traditionally, you know, you had the vertically integrated utilities, and pretty much they would, if I could use the word, dictate what happens. I think more and more as you move to the smart metering, smart grid, customer engagement and customer engagement is crucial to the success of any of these initiatives, including prepayment, smart metering, smart grids.
I mean, it sounds to me like there's this opportunity, and we touched on the analogy beforehand, like in telecoms, where you actually leap a technology. You know, what's the point in digging all these roads up and putting in fixed lines when we can do it wirelessly? It sounds to me like there's a potential to leap the way energy delivery is done by a better integrated renewable strategy and all that sort of stuff, which is probably way ahead of what can actually be done in, you know, let's say in the UK, where, you know, most of our stuff comes from coal and gas, no matter what people say, you know. So do you think that's a possibility?
I think absolutely. If you look at the traditional generation model, you know, it's vertically integrated utilities, building power stations of different types, and you have massive transmission lines or distribution lines to get it down to those consumers. I think with the renewable energies, if you look at photovoltaic cells, there's an opportunity now for small embedded generation to lie within rural and distributed communities, and I think that's a fundamental change in terms of making electricity available, and I think that's significant from the traditional model, and there's an opportunity to leapfrog the way we actually put the source of generation in a more cost-effective way.
Yeah, it's more distributed, and it's quite exciting as well. We're coming to the end of our time here. I'd like to ask you one more question, because we are at African Utility Week, again, albeit holed up in a studio up here. If I can ask you, what are some of the things that you've seen on the show floor that particularly excite you, or some of the vibe that you may have already picked up about this conference, because it's been going for a long time, about, oh, well, I'm really excited that this is being talked about, or whatever. It can be anything,
Yeah, I think one of the things that strikes me at the conference this year is, I mean, I've been to many of these conferences over the years. What I enjoy is something that Itron also promotes. The challenges we face in Africa as Africans is quite unique, and one of the things to solve these problems is collaboration, something strongly promoted by Itron. It's not about our solution or somebody else's solution. It's about the stakeholders coming jointly together to look at the benefit. And what excites me about what I've seen on the floor is you're actually seeing a combination of metering companies, service providers, telecom industries, green generation. So it's nice to see the mix of cross of stakeholders actually coming to the same venue to talk about solutions to solve the challenge.
And you're seeing that collaboration happen well, I would like to say in real time, but it probably doesn't take, it moves a bit slower than that in this market, doesn't it?
I think we're moving in the right direction.
Yes. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for your time. Yeah, it's been great to have you here, and thank you very much for watching. As you know by now, Engerati, we've got a lot of presentations, and some of the presentations that Imraan alluded to will be available on demand on Engerati, so please go ahead and watch those. White papers, case studies, which I know you have said you want to see more of, those are also available on Engerati through companies like Itron, who publish white papers and case studies daily almost, so I hope you enjoy that. Thank you for watching.